Real quick, before we hop into today's video, just wanted to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, my wallet. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a little bit of a different speed of a video from what I normally do, right? I'm not doing any gameplay today. Unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to do editing because I'm currently getting things ready for moving. I do not have a lot of time to do editing as a result, and I apologize for that. But I did want to get some content to you guys, so what I'm going to be doing today is going over something that I see a lot of people making mistakes in when it comes to the One Piece trading card game, and that is going to be how to efficiently use your attacks and counter to get a leg up on your opponents. So with that being said, I'm just gonna rehash the quick basic mechanics of countering for anybody who's super new. But basically in One Piece, right, you have combat between two leaders or a leader and a character. The goal of that being to win the combat, you have to meet or exceed the power of that opponent's character or leader. When you swing a 5k to 5k, you need to get at least 1k counter to be able to get out of that swing. So that's the basic mechanic of attacking, right? Is when you swing, you are trying to either win that battle or get counter from your opponent. Now, the purpose of swings can actually be multifaceted, right? And what I mean by that is just because you're attacking something though doesn't mean you're trying to win that attack necessarily. And I'll explain what I mean here in a minute. Obviously, sometimes when you attack, it's going to get countered, and not every time that you attack, you don't necessarily want them to take. By that, what I mean is you don't need to win every battle, but you need to win every objective. That's really where tempo comes in, is trying to get the most out of the cards you have to take the most away from your opponent. When that comes into play with attacking is when you swing your 5k leader at your opponent's 5k leader, for instance, you're asking them to give you one card out of their hand, right? A 1k counter. Now, let's say that, you know, your opponent has a very low hand size. A lot of people would just use this opportunity to put a lot of Dawn and swing in without developing a character or something, because most of their attacks are going to hit, but they just swing in with a lot of Dawn. Well, what you could do instead is try to make sure they have no counter. So for instance, if your opponent has a 5k leader and they have, you know, no cards on their board for simplicity's sake, right, and they only have 4 cards in hand, what you could do is, instead of swinging, you know, something like a 7 or a 9, which will probably hit, you could swing just a 5 and see if they have a counter or not, because an opponent more often than not is going to respect a 5k swing and give you a 1k counter, because it's a lot easier to get out of than a 9. So what you can do is you can check people's hands for counter, and you can do the same thing with attacking characters. So for instance, if your opponent has 1 character on their board and you have 2 or 3, they want to try and maintain their board state so that they can keep the pressure up, probably. So you can start by poking their character for exactly what it's at to try and get a counter out of their hand. And then this gives you the opportunity, if they go too low in hand countering for characters, you can pivot to their life, or vice versa, right? If they start countering too much for their life, you can pivot to their board and clear their board instead, and they won't have the counter to save it. And so one of my favorite things to do when I am swinging against one of my opponent's characters or their leader is I like to check for 2Ks. Certain matchups this is more effective in than others, which I'll get into in a moment, the matchup dependent things. But checking for 2Ks is when you swing exactly 1K over what the target is. So if your opponent's a 5K leader swinging a 6, or if your opponent has like a 7K character swinging an 8, right, is you can try and filter out your opponent's 2Ks, which they probably don't have as many of as they would 1Ks, or potentially a couple counter events. That being said, what are the best numbers to be attacking with? My favorite numbers to attack with are odd numbers to your opponent's leader. So for instance, if your opponent, for simplicity's sake, is a 5K leader, I love swinging 5s, 7s, 9s, 11s, anything like that. And here's why. At a 5k swing, you're asking for exactly 1 card, 1k counter, could be anything. But sometimes they'll have to give you a 2k if they want to respect that swing and they don't have any 1ks in hand. Swinging a 7 means they now have to give you either a 3k event, or if they have no Dawn up, a 2k and a 1k, so it asks for minimum 2 cards. You could be like, well, why not just swing an 8 and ask for 2 2ks? Because if you're going to get 2 cards, you might as well get 2 cards and save the 1 Dawn for either playing something out or potentially sending another. Because think about it like this, right? If you have a 5k leader and you have your 5k character, if you have 3 Dawn to equip, you could put 3 on your 5k character and swing in for 8, and then your opponent has to give you 2k. Or what you could do is you could swing for 7, which means they have to give you a 2k and a 1k, and then you could swing for a 6, which means they have to give you a 2k. And the difference being that on the first swing, because you're only asking for a 2k and a 1k, if they don't have that 1k, now they have to give you 2 2ks. So when you swing your second 6, potentially you could get 3 2ks or guarantee that the second hit happens a little bit better, just because we only asked for the minimum number of cards and they didn't have the 1k. So it punishes them for not having perfect counter when you swing these nice numbers. And then 9, same thing, but asking for 3 cards, right? Because you need a 2k, 2k, 1k to get out of that. 11 is pretty much always guaranteed to hit, but it's asking for 3 2ks or whatever. With that being said, that is my favorite way to get the most out of my swings. However, not every case is going to be a 5 at 5, 7 at 5, 9 at 5, is it? No. So one instance of this would be if you're playing against a blue purple Luffy, right? A 3 life leader with 6k power. So this changes the math on pretty much all of your characters, because now normally if you were like, oh, I'll just play out my 3-drop 5k rush Zoro and attack your leader, well, now that does absolutely nothing because their leader is a 6k. So what you need to do now is input an extra Dawn, or make sure you're swinging with characters that are on 6s, 8s, and 10s, right? Because that way you're still asking for 2 cards. So you're always keeping that specific number right there, right? That 3k above, or excuse me, 2k above, because they have to give you 3k to get above that. Another matchup in this instance would be Dracul Mihawk. Normally a 5 life 5k leader, but if you're a slash leader, he's a 6k. So that's going to change all of your math there. Or if he plays Lon Beppo, then he becomes a 7k leader. So now the best swings are 7, 9, right? 7 asking for 1, 9 asking for 2, and so on and so forth. And if you're a slash leader and he plays Lon Beppo, I mean, honestly, just good luck, right? 8k leader, pretty tough. Now, how can I take this a step further to get even more value out of my swings? Because that's just the base way to get value and ask for the most cards. Not every deck runs the same number of counter cards. So there's math that you can do depending on the matchup, but in general, the math that you assume for people's cards in hand is about 1 to 1.1k counter for every card in hand. That's about the math as how it works out. Obviously, if the game's gone longer and you know what they've been searching, you can tell, okay, maybe this guy has more 2Ks because he's been saving it, right? Or maybe he's more bricked up if he's playing something like Bonnie, right? Because they've been saving all their big drops for the end of the game. If it's Emu, they have infinite counter because they have a bajillion 4K events. That being said, if you're playing against something like Mihawk, Mihawk is generally known to run fewer 2Ks and more counter events. So one of my favorite things to do against a Mihawk is if I'm a 5k and he's a 5k, right? I'm not playing like a slash. I love swinging 6s at Dracul Mihawk because he doesn't have a lot of 2ks. So it either forces him to give you 2 1ks, take the life aggressively, which puts him in range of pudding or something like that. Or, right, the other thing is he'll have to give you his events. And his event counters are good to get out of his hand for multiple reasons. One, because if he has to counter with a 3 or a 4k event, for a 2k swing, you're getting like an extra 2k worth of value out of that little 6k poke. The other reason is because a lot of his events are very good utility wise, namely Ashura, Blade, 9 Sword Style, Drawn, Demon, Dead Man's Game, whatever, Dead Man's Game, or the Luffy one that lets him freeze 2 7 costs, right? Both of those are very, very strong cards, but if you're forcing him to use them for counter because you keep swinging and asking for 6s, you can get a little bit more value out of your swings in that matchup. Another situation that's very good is Emu. Emu loves to play 4K counter events. He loves it when you stack all your Dawn on your guy and you send him in and he gives you 1 or 2 cards max for it every single time. So what is really good into Emu? Also 6k swings, because Emu doesn't run too many 2k counters either, but more importantly, just swinging 5s and 6s at Emu as much as possible while devoting the rest of your Dawn to doing that with as many characters as possible or developing your board, right? And what this does is it forces Emu to eat out their hand. And what you want to do is damage their hand as much as possible so that by the time they get to their 10 cost 5 elders, the only cards they have in hand is maybe 1 or 2k counter and like a onesies, twosies cards, and then a bunch of 4k events. Because what you can do is once you eventually weed their hand down, all they'll have left is those 4k events. And now all of your pokes, they have to respect, because if they block them, right, they lose a character and you get rid of a blocker. And if they don't have all the rest of their counter, now they have to give you a 4k event for a 5 or a 6k swing. That's pretty good value. So that's another way to get like a lot of value in those specific matchups. Another one is Blue Purple Luffy. Blue Purple Luffy has Gum Gum Giant, crazy defensive card. It lets them counter all the way up to a 10k leader. You know, stacking a lot of Dawn on your guys and trying to hit face doesn't usually work because they're very defensive. It's also almost impossible to clear their big bodies using combat because they can do the exact same thing. Gum Gum Giant gets them up to like 13k characters, 14k characters, depending on which one. However, blue-purple Luffy also, from my experience, does play a decent number of 2Ks, right? Because you have Uso Hachi at like 2 to 4, you have the Sanji blocker, and you have the Otama. And they have a lot of hand fixing late game to give them 2Ks. So I like to try and just pressure their hand with as many 6K pokes to get a card out of hand as I can. And then when I'm trying to go for lethal, if I'm swinging big, I'm swinging a 10K every single time. Now you might be saying, why not swing like a 9? Well, if you swing 9, then they can Gum Gum Giant out of it, obviously. If you swing 11, they can do Gum Gum plus a 2K. So if you just swing as many 10s as you can, it forces them to give you a Gum Gum Giant plus a card, which is kind of a big deal. They also have the 1 cost plus 3K event. So if you swing a 9, sure, you could force them to give you that in a 1K, but they could Gum Gum Giant out of it as well if they have that. So it's important to look through the trash in this scenario when you're trying to do these attacks onto Luffy. See, okay, how many Gum Gum Giants has he used or gone through? How many of the Gear 2s has he used and gone through, etc. And so that's how you can try to get the most out of your swings, by using your opponent's trash to gain knowledge of what they could have in their hand, as well as whatever they've searched and whatnot. So those are some ways in more matchup specific instances to get the most value out of your swings there. So just to do a quick recap on what we've talked about in this video, we talked about the basic mechanics of countering, the best swings to put your leader, asking for a 1K or a 2K 1K, right? So 5, 7s, 11s, or 6, 8s, 10s. More matchup specific ways to play around certain things like counter events and a low 2K count in the deck. This is just one of many aspects of the game that can get as deep or shallow as you want it to get if you look into a bunch of deck lists for all the decks in the meta right now, which don't recommend because there's a lot. But if you look into all those lists and you see what their tools are, you can more effectively decide how to attack to get the most value out of your swing. So other things to notice while you're doing those attacks is, do they have Dawn Up? If so, what counter events do they probably have in hand? And you plan accordingly. If you enjoyed today's video and you thought it was helpful, please drop a like down below to let me know. Hit that subscribe button while you're down there because it's free and it helps me out a ton. And hit the notification bell right next to it so that you never miss another video, post, or stream. Hit the curvy arrow button to share this video with your friends so that they can get some help as well. And leave a comment in the comment section down below telling me which part of this helped you the most, something that you learned, something that I missed, or something that you would like to see discussed in the future, and I will be sure to read that comment, take a look, and get back to you as soon as I can. With that being said, it was great to talk to you guys for a little bit. I will be getting some gameplay to you as soon as possible, and have a great rest of your day.